Hello and welcome to HighCast. This episode of HighCast is recorded in the studios of Highland FM, highlandfm.org.au. This podcast is brought to you by Rad Solutions. For your strategic engagement solutions, go to radsolutions.com.au. Our guest today is Ian Scandrett. I got all these details wrong before. Ian is a local retiree. I hope he doesn't mind me saying that. And Deputy Mayor at Wingecarribee Shire Council. Welcome, Ian.
Welcome, David. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for coming on. You just wanted to...
Well, I will always say that in any interview that I, of course, being interviewed as myself, I don't represent council, but these are my views, and my views are often very aligned to the platform on which I stood. I've been elected to council now for 2 terms. I've been Deputy Mayor for 3 years. We have a mayoral election in September this year, where the Mayor and the Deputy Mayor will be re-elected for the final 2 years of this term.
Awesome. So while we're getting disclaimers out of the way, these opinions are mine, not those of Highland FM nor of Rad Solutions. So I got Ian in here today because a number of people on Facebook had I put out a request and I said, who do you want to listen to? Your name came up very often. There's a number of people who came up very often. You're one of them, so thanks very much. And you talked about a mayoral election in September. For the layperson like myself, give us a Wingecarribee government 101. Like how does it all work? How does it come together? Okay,
well, the council is elected every 4 years. I'm in my second term. I stood on I'm an independent, always have been. I stood on an open and transparent ticket, and I intend to and continue to carry that out. I don't believe that much on council should be closed or confidential, other than obviously legal matters and staff. In fact, Ted Mack, of course, who served in local government, state government and federal government, is famous for saying that under his mayoralty, North Sydney Council never had anything that was in closed council, with the exception of those 2 things. So, and I'm pleased that Ted, in fact, endorsed me for running for council when I ran for HighCast Council many years ago.
So running for council's in the blood.
Well, it became a necessity of sorts, David, because at some time what was happening in Leichhardt was of great concern to me as a small business owner and a resident, and I was encouraged to run, and in fact I missed out by some 99 votes. But the point is you get engaged in that process and you become very aware of how they work, how the systems work. And I was able to, from the outside, achieve some outcomes in the Leichhardt municipality. It's now called the Inner West. It's a combined council, Inner West Council, from being outside the room without having to have the whole skin in the game, if you wish.
So Wingecarribee has 9 councillors?
9 councillors, and a number of them are in multiple terms. Councillor Duncan Gare is, I think, 23 years on council.
Really?
Wow, Councillor Larry Whipper, I think, is 18 years on council.
Wow, that's a substantial amount of time.
Indeed. So the refresh rate, if you wish, which is something that people ask me about, there are a handful of new councillors on council.
Yeah.
But it tends to favour the incumbent, the election process.
And so 9 councillors, and excuse my ignorance on this, but how, does everyone run in a pool together? Is it divided up across the Wingecarribee? So
no, we don't have wards. I think that's what No, we are a 1 ward council. And we have obviously voting places throughout the Shire.
Yeah. So everyone just jumps in the mixer together and goes for it.
I have run 3 times. The first election was as number 2 to former councillor Jim Major from Robertson, who is a good friend of mine. I admired what he did in council in terms of standing up for the ordinary people. So in those 3 elections, I've put together tickets of 9 people. That's the only councillor in all 3 elections that's done that. Most tickets are either 5 people, the minimum, or they stand below the line, as we call it, as a single person.
It's all so complicated just for a local council election. It seems too hard for someone who has half a brain like myself.
The entry level I guess, hurdles are quite significant.
Yeah.
I mean, you need somebody to be your public officer, whether you're a team of one or, a person standing on your own.
And what's
or
a public
team.
officer? What does that mean?
Well, they've got to do all of your election paperwork with State Election Authority.
Oh, really? You can't do that yourself?
Well, you can, but
It's just
you've also
hard,
got to have
yeah.
somebody at arm's length who signs all of that
Okay, yeah.
and so on. But the paperwork's quite extensive, and,
Yeah.
and in a way, so it should be, because as you've seen in the media, there's been a number of
Yes.
matters.
Have we checked everyone's nationality status?
A former deputy mayor from Auburn has triggered a number of those. In fact, I noticed he was committed yesterday, found guilty of manipulating electoral information and signing up ratepayers. But look, it's a complicated project. You've got to process. You've got to want to be there.
Yeah.
And you've got to want to serve. And unfortunately, as I was saying to somebody on the way here today, the stats are something like 40% of voters have no idea who they're going to vote for until they walk up to the path to the hall.
Now, is that just a local government thing, or is that
Well, it's certainly, that's a number I can quote as being research for local government elections, but I think it would be similar for federal and state. In other words, so much disinterest takes place. Now, we're lucky in Australia that we have compulsory elections at all levels.
Yep.
You only have to look at what's happening in the States.
Completely agree.
I mean, President Trump engaged a whole lot more people in the election process, which was substantially to his benefit.
Yes.
Their participation rate, I think, was about a third
Yep.
of the population, and he increased that. But I think compulsory voting is a great thing.
So do I.
Having said that, there's a certain amount of disengagement, and recently there's been quite a bit of media about people are just tuning out of politics per se, and I don't blame them. It's at times just never ending and disappointing.
Okay. So is that your insider's view from Wingecarribee Shire Council, or is that just your opinion on politics in general?
I think both.
Yeah.
Because I think in local government people feel disconnected. I don't think we connect very well. Our customer, if you wish, surveys, I'd actually quite prefer to call our ratepayers shareholders. That's just a
Interesting.
view I have. But we call them customers.
What about like your community, or like your fellow residents?
Well,
or why don't you just say us?
Us, yes.
Yeah.
Well,
because it is us.
I'm a small business person.
Yeah.
I ran quite a large small business in footwear in Sydney. I had two large shops, one in Rozelle and one in North Parramatta. And when I retired down here at age 49 with my family, I eventually exited those businesses. Now, they were built, substantial growth over 2 decades, because we were very good with customer service. And in that category, customer means the person that you choose to serve. In council, you can't choose to not serve somebody.
That's
so
true.
I advocate, and I'm a mutualist, just by the way, totally believe in mutuals. It's a group scheme like a mutual,
Yep.
Think of HCF, that's a mutual. Think of the NRMA, that's a mutual.
Yep.
But we should be focused on our shareholders. In other words, everyone who has an interest in this shire. And you have an interest whether you are owning land or renting, because somewhere in there you are occupying land and you are paying rates through your rent or through directly. So you are all shareholders. Unfortunately, I seem to be on my own on this. Yes,
Yeah.
Repeat after me. We're all shareholders. A famous slide. But anyway, we're all individuals. But no, that's my view, is that we should consider everyone shareholders. We can't discriminate, if you wish, or choose not to serve some, though apparently at times that criticism is levelled at us that we do that. I do think the customer surveys that we do, and the recent one was last year, shows that we are still not achieving effective communication.
Yeah, and I think if you've got 40% of people who turn up and haven't decided who their preferred candidate is, that demonstrates that people don't know what's going on. They haven't made a decision on a particular course of action. They don't know who their current count. Like I didn't know that we didn't have wards. All of that sort of stuff. So it definitely is an indictment of that.
Let me put it to you this way. For example, I ran my ticket. I named it the Just Fix It ticket, and that has been my platform to serve and represent the shareholders of this community. Others, of course, might have party affiliations or just local affiliations, but the message that we're getting out to ratepayers, residents, in fact, those shareholders I was just talking about, the us factor.
Yeah.
David, the customer surveys, the 3 we've done over the time I've been on council, have not shown an improvement in that space. In certain parts of it, yes, but generally speaking, they feel disconnected, and we haven't been able to change that. A good example, of course, is this Station Street upgrade project, which I've suffered at the hands of my fellow councillors some criticism on, but I remain resilient on that.
Woe is me, Ian.
Yes, indeed. But look, I have an absolute view on that, and I supported that project from day one when we applied for the funding from the sale of the Port Kembla Ports lease, and we got $7.5 million for a barrel bypass. That is a brand new road from the bottom of the Eastbrook Centre down here, right through to Links Road on Mossvale Road. It involved an upgrading of Station Street to go with that. But we're now spending, and I quote, these numbers are my numbers, but some $15.5 million, not the $9.5 million we consulted the community with, on this upgrade of Station Street. So when I talk about shareholders or us, there's 3,000 people out there, maybe a lot of them are us, who have signed a community petition.
Yeah, I've seen them around, particularly at the markets up at Barrel, or maybe in Mittagong too. I can't remember. Yeah,
it's absolutely. Well, I think it's an indictment of how effective the communication process was that council did, where 150 people went to the shop front over three weeks, and a bunch of people clicked on the internet, and some 38 submissions were made, not all favourable.
Yeah, look, I
3,000 people signing a petition saying not happy Jan.
Yeah, look, I think it's a very. I don't want to get into the details of Station Street.
But it's about community consultation.
Yeah, that's probably more of what I'm interested in. So I've got some. Not thoughts, it's not the right way of putting it, but I want to sort of draw the line between what's happening at Station Street versus what's in the community strategic plan.
Okay.
And I want to be very careful that we don't, council, the people at council are probably doing the best that they can. They're not sitting there behind their desks. Well, look, I am going to say they're probably doing the best they can. I don't know those people.
We have a very hardworking staff, David, and I support our staff. But of course, our staff are beholden to the council, and a majority in that view.
Yeah.
But I have a ongoing view about better communication. I keep on advocating for community signboards with changeable letters, like the old outside the public school, particularly in our villages. We're all mobile in this shire, therefore signs at the entrances to the villages, a couple of dozen across the shire, and you're talking to everyone. And
sure.
The RFS use those, as do public schools.
Yep.
There are ways to increase our effective communication, and they're in the targets in the community plans that we have, 2031, for example, which are very clear about increasing that and getting a better satisfaction rating. Well, we're not achieving that, and it's a great concern.
And I think the whole point of and I might be wrong, but the whole point of the 2031 strategic plan was, this is your community, or our community, have our say. And I kind of feel that the direction of the strategic plan is set is different from what we see driving down the street. So, for example, Station Street, for example, like you've highlighted, it was a barrel bypass, and perhaps that's not coming now. But I want to know, what's the overall direction that council's heading? What is our transport plan? What is our small business plan? What is our plan for telecommunications,
Well, let's
for
go
power
through
and all
those
of those
three.
sort of things. Yeah.
Okay, well, first of all, our transport plan, for example, I don't believe we're addressing that in the way that the community mandated us to do. And a good example of that is building footpaths for shared bike walk situations. We haven't done any of that to any substantial degree. The victory, if I can call it that, I had last term was getting the one across the Jib on Mittagong Road built, and of course that doesn't complete that whole loop. There's still some unpaved areas and it is only 900 mil wide, which of course is not specific to our shared path, which should be 1.6 or 1.8. But yet it's getting used. Drive across the Jib and you'll see people walking there, whether they're locals or visitors. The point is it's fitness and it ties in.
Yep.
On the matter of technology, well, the NBN is not our gig.
Yep.
However, in the last term, I continued to advocate for council to be involved in that, and I'm delighted to tell you that, for example, in our economic development zone in West Mossvale, out past the sale yards and so on, there's 630 hectares of land there marked for industrial development. Hasn't been taken up. It's been going 15 years now. But however, we're now looking at putting fibre to the curb in there as a point of difference to attract relocating Sydney businesses. I think that's a great initiative. Looks like that we're going to spend about $250,000 looking into that and planning that, and then we'll obviously go for grants in that space. That would be the Silicon Valley, perhaps, lifestyle.
I would really
approach.
like to see something like that in the Highlands.
And if you think of Cambridge in the UK, which is a university town, they have a technology hub in there which is commutable, as would we be, which has that ability to connect. Now, Mossvale is unique in that the north-south fibre optics link, the main one in Australia, goes right through Mossvale, and it's easy to connect. And in fact, the University of Sydney's Mouse House is on there.
I just became aware of the Mouse House. It's really exciting.
Indeed, and they actually, like Star Trek, they actually digitise the mice and send them across the world. Now, I'm kidding, of course, but the point is they can do everything else. And I attended a very good presentation at the TAFE in Mossvale recently, where the refurbished aged care tuition centre was being demonstrated, and it's completely connected. So classes can be shared live right across the southern part of this state, well, of course, across the world, right down to interactive dummies in the beds and cameras and so on. Fascinating technology and great opportunity for young people. In fact, I believe that course has been completely subscribed as a result of that
Fantastic.
new initiative. So, yes, connectivity is a big part of what we need to do. Transport generally, we are, of course, a car-focused society, but I'm pleased to say that I've been advocating for an electric charging station to come down here. There's an NRMA initiative in that space coming, and I believe that we are favourably being shortlisted in that space. Our staff have been involved because we are the first point of call out of Sydney. Now, Goulburn pipped us a couple of years ago by putting Tesla recharging stations in there, but of course you have to look at range and also driver fatigue and all those sort of things. So I want them to come in here. Now, we have a tourism operator in Mittagong who was way ahead of the game and installed his own Tesla charging station because he wanted people to come to his accommodation and restaurant. I could name him, couldn't I?
Yeah, you could. This is
Fitzroy Inn, John Griffin.
Yeah.
Very, very good idea. Now, we've got a recharging station at the Welcome Centre, but it's very limited. It doesn't do Tesla cars and so on. It's the wrong technology. So I look forward to that sort of thing because we need to be able to say, come to the Highlands.
Yeah, and look, I think you've just rolled off 10 great initiatives, right? But how is all of that coming together, and what role is council playing in fulfilling that vision? Because I think lots of people, and probably some of your fellow councillors, could go, here's another 10 great initiatives. But I feel like, and the people that I speak to on the street are saying, well, it's all great to say you've got 10 great initiatives, but how is it all coming together, and how are we pulling this together as a community?
Well, I have concerns about our effectiveness in that space, and I guess I'm on my own in that at many times. But we closed down the Economic Development Committee in February.
I read that overnight.
Now I've chaired that for 3 years. It's a committee that had 12 community members from all walks of life. Those community members were selected by the mayor, the GM, myself, after the last election. Fantastic, skilled people who wanted to donate their time to giving advice and information to the council. But there's been a concerted effort to shut that committee down, which I am disappointed at, and that did take place, and that committee will not be re-established, if at all, and that is a recent development in last night's meeting, where a motion was amended to take out that being a definite re-establishment. And I feel that's a negative step.
Yeah, and I think we started off talking about disinterest and disengagement, and I don't know the ins and outs of how that operated, but when you see a committee that did exist, that has a purpose and that has community representation that no longer exists, well then how do we expect ongoing engagement across the community? It just seems like a bit of a double-edged sword.
Well, it's political and nothing else. I'll say that there were 23 applications for those 12 jobs, 12 roles. It's an advisory committee. I don't think many of those people will reapply. I think they will say, as you're suggesting, what the hell?
Well, I'm not suggesting anything, Ian. Don't put words in my mouth.
Well, okay, well, but people are questioning what we're doing, and that will, I think, be there. Look, Economic Development Advisory Committee, just that. Now,
it sounds like the words, right? It sounds like it's A, going to grow the economy here. B, it's something that involves community. Well, isn't that council's job?
Our 2031 talks very strongly about, listeners, the 2031 is our strategic plan that was done after a lot of workshops, and it drives council, well, supposedly drives council on all matters.
In the integrated planning,
but often it's in the bottom drawer. That's my personal view, as is everything on this podcast.
And look, I've read the thing. It's 30 pages. Like, I might even be under quoting. It's big. It is a huge document. How can anyone know all of the content in there?
Well, on economic development, and I've always advocated sustainable economic development because it focuses on the strengths of the Highlands. And those strengths, incidentally, are, as I say, we're the Garden Shire and we're the Water Shire.
The Garden and Water Shire, okay.
We're the green belt for Sydney now, because the green belt that used to be there has been built in.
Yeah, Campbelltown is no longer green.
As it creeps here. But we're also the water supply, the main water supply for Sydney.
Yeah, that's true.
So we have...
part of it, yeah.
And some of the local planning has protected that. For example, our 100-acre rule, where that was a sort of thing was abandoned.
So where you can't subdivide to lower...
Well, you can't have small blocks. And if you go to Camden and Picton and up that way...
Yeah, Wollondilly is full of those.
It's all a hodgepodge. So the strength of the Highlands, and of course that relates back to its tourism and its vistas, its massive amount of green space, is all to do with that planning. Now, I have advocated all the way through council for the green between, which is keeping green spaces between our towns. In fact, that's enshrined in our LEP now.
So there's a local environment plan?
Yes, it is. Yeah. And it's a very good thing. But constantly in the US and the UK, for example, those green belts contain towns. And with that goes a message about, well, if you're going to have sustainable population increase and business increase, then it has to be within the bounds of the town, and therefore, for example, infill housing. And the state government, we had a briefing yesterday, the state government are changing a whole lot of legislation in that space, which will increase naturally the density in towns by a group, for example, row housing, which is something I've always supported. Yes, I came from the land of the semis and the terraces, being Balmain. But, well, I think, these things are coming at us, but we've got to be very careful to preserve what we have.
Yeah, and I think what people would see, in principle, what you're saying is correct, but then there's developments like Renwick, and Retford Park and the new developments out at Bundanoon that don't seem to be in line with that. They're seeing that there's hundreds, if not thousands, of new houses going up, and the necessary transport infrastructure isn't being built to support it, the telecommunications infrastructure to support it. And this isn't a shot at you, but they're going, well, what is council doing? What is the plan? They've got this 30-page community strategic plan. How does all that align? And how are we going to pull this off? What's it going to look like in 10, 20 years?
You'll be paying for a lot of it.
I know I am right now.
You and us,
we will be
the
paying
shareholders.
Yeah.
Well, for example, Chelsea Kamunji, which is the development that was approved by state government late last year, east of Mossvale on Yarra Road.
Yes,
1,500
homes. Mossvale, didn't I? Yeah,
1,500 homes. But there's a minimum block size there, but there's no number of blocks. So the minimum lot size there is 450 metres.
That's crazy.
Very small.
It's just crazy.
Well, cheek by jowl, and
But why do you come to the Highlands and live like that?
Those homes will be 4 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, 3 garages. There'll be 900 mil from the boundary, and depending on what the approvals process gurgitates, there may be as many as 3,000 blocks. Now, Prue Goward said on radio earlier this week that she accepts there will be a 50% increase in the population of Mossvale.
I don't want to be negative and say we don't want more people, because more people bring more money, which means more money gets spent in town, which means we can grow the economy, right?
Well, somewhat
in a basic principle.
Well, most of the building in this shire is done by trades that come in.
Well, yes. Or what I'm saying, the people that move here,
yes,
bring their income and then spend money in
discretionary expenditure. Indeed, but home building is a one-off hit.
Yeah. So I'm not actually. So make it very clear, I'm not talking about the home building. I'm saying people coming to the Highlands, building the population is in principle makes sense, but it's not. It doesn't. It seems like it's not controlled, or it's not.
Well, you would have read in many media that people think that Mossvale is now a peak hour gridlock. Now,
look, I'll put on my SES hat now. So I'm the deputy local controller of the Wingecarribee SES. We cannot get our rescue vehicles down through Mossvale.
Correct.
It is very, very difficult to get it through peak hour.
Listeners, those sheds are out on Berrima Road, and of course the choke points start as you come into town to Waite Street.
Yep.
And get worse from there. Look, as I said, I came from the Balmain area, and of course I'm used to traffic.
You're used to it sitting there,
and people are alarmed at the delays here. And in comparison, of course, they're different.
It's chalk and cheese.
Chalk and cheese, your words.
Yeah.
But look, I am concerned because with that 50% increase in population will come a 60-70% increase in cars, because modern households are 3 cars per household, and particularly in that demographic. But we've got a whole lot of issues in planning at the moment. Infrastructure, you will be paying for a lot of it, because the upgrade of the Mossvale, Barrel and Mittagong sewage works, STPs as we call them, treatment plants, Mossvale alone is $35 million to cope with the increased building that's going to be taking place. And that's already been factored in, and that's not being covered by the special rates increase.
No, really?
No. This is we're planning it from reserves, but it doesn't even touch the sides. Now, a lot of that funding will come from that development, those developments.
So
but
it is a double-edged sword.
Well, yes, but it can't ever cover the whole thing.
Yeah, okay.
So the community will end up wearing that, the cost of additional car parking in Mossvale, the cost of the congestion, and so on. There is a plan for a bypass via Sutter Road across at McCourt Avenue, across the railway line onto Kirkham and therefore Douglas Road. Unfortunately, we prioritised last term the bridge out at Boral over the railway line rather than the bridge at McCourt Avenue. And that bypass will mean you can come from Barrel to the highway quicker, or from Robbo to the highway and reverse quicker. In other words, a lot of that through traffic will go out to the west and join the Hume at New Berrima. However, this is something that needs to be built now, and I know that Prue Goward, I want to congratulate her on that, is working in that space. But it's not going to solve the long-term problems, because that 1,500 or 3,000 new homes is going to choke Mossvale. And we can talk about the other towns. They've all got the same problem.
Oh, and in another couple of years' time, there'll be another development. Because
right now there's other developments.
Yeah, so it's almost like we might subtly, or not subtly, but partially solve a problem that will then get bigger again later. So I guess that's what I'm really looking to council for is how does this holistically fit together? What's our vision?
Not in my view, not very well, because I don't think we're doing integrated planning the way it was meant to be, and I've got to lay some of that blame at the state government. For example, on Chelsea Kumungi, we refused it 4 times in 5 years. Refused it, and the state government overrode us on that. Now we do have control of the final planning for that development at this point in time. But as somebody pointed out ever so dryly the other day to me, you can't even get your DAs through for new homes and for new home buyers and retirees. We had somebody address us at council recently who is a new home builder, and he's totally frustrated with the delays in our planning system and compares it to others in his network, other councils, where they have a different output. And yes, we have a shortage of staff. But yes, we've had that for 2 years, and yes, we haven't been able to resolve that. So I think we're on a slippery slope, to be quite honest, on our planning.
These are Ian's views, not mine.
No, absolutely. Yeah, so let's say that again. These are my views. But were you to be at council last night, you would have heard a number of councillors who are now stepping into that space and expressing concerns to the general manager, who is ultimately responsible for that operational side of the business, and delivering reasonable approval times. We heard last night, for example, that we are still over 100 days in approving a basic home on new development. In other words, no neighbour or anything else, just getting it through the system.
What's that, greater than 3 months?
It's meant to be 40 days.
Yeah.
The staff answer is, if you don't like the staff comment that if that 40 days isn't workable, you always have the opportunity to go to court. Well, I say that new home buyers and retirees who are building new homes and
I couldn't afford to go to court.
And the tradespeople, yes, exactly. And why should they? Now, other councils, and I want to just compliment the mayor here, Ken Halstead. Ken is pushing quite hard on this, finally, we're saying to the GM, what are you going to do? And, look, staff shortages, or they don't. I mean, I would have thought planning staff would have been jumping to come and live down here.
Yeah, I would
escape the big smoke.
I would think that a well-paying role in a beautiful area like this would be hen's teeth.
A senior planner would earn in the vicinity of 80,000 on our state government grades. Mind you, our budget, we increased by 560,000 last March of last year, to allow for additional roles in that space. Only one of those roles has been filled. We're still advertising for 7 planning staff. And yet, what is happening is we're using consultants more and more. Now, they earn about double what a senior planner does, about 160 grand. So there's a shift, if you wish, to consultants. And there's a massive increase in our budget because we're having to use consultants to prop up the shortage in staff. Is it satisfactory? No. Are there problems with consultants both on our side and also on the applicant side? Yes. Some of those complying development certifiers probably are less than careful with their paperwork in terms of our planning. And there's some emerging evidence of that.
Interesting times to be in the Wingecarribee. I feel like we could look at it as that it's terrible, or it's a slippery slope. But I see it as an opportunity. It's a really big challenge, but one that if we all work together, we can solve it, because it's worth solving. I think.
I want to, if I may, talk about community, because one of the things I'm very proud of is the community, and you're a community person being in the volunteer area.
Yep.
We have a very high volunteer participation in the Southern Highlands in all sorts of roles. That is under some threat at the moment, with people being, I think, time poor, family, carers, working longer, not easier, and so on. So that's top of my list is to continue to promote that. I've worked with the volunteer group in Mossvale, Volwing, to help them get additional and continuing grants. And for example, in emergency services like your SES and RFS, I'm very keen to see that participation held up. But of course, these same problems come through all the time, and that is, it's ageing. Right, we're all aging. We've got an aging population.
Speak for yourself, Ian. I'm getting younger.
Look, well, my grey hair matches the rest of the ones in the chamber, but I'm the youngest there.
Really?
I am.
I shouldn't have said that with such surprise.
No. Well, I'm 61 next month.
We did talk about that the other day, actually, with one of the previous guests. All of the councillors are of a certain demographic. And it wasn't a slight, but it's the truth.
Yes. Well, I'm appalled that women are not represented on council. There was no appetite by any ladies in the Shire to head up a ticket.
Well, if there's any ladies out there that want to debate that,
ring me now. No, but I think that there was a certain probably a reputation type matter here. I think the last council had its moments, and I do think that ladies were dissuaded from running at the top of tickets.
Yeah, and anyone under 50 too. It seems like.
Well, again, it is a huge commitment if you take it. I mean, I spend quite a lot of time on. What is
the commitment? Are you there 20 hours a week kind of thing? Not there, but okay. Are you devoting 20 hours a week?
Well, I wish there was a memorandum that you signed as you became a contestant.
So someone would be putting in 60 hours, some might be putting in 10.
Yeah. When you stand for election, you contest election, I would like to see an acknowledgement of the time you intend or you need to give and that you intend to give. Certainly, it's at least every Wednesday, because if it's not council every fortnight, it's briefing sessions every other. And then, of course, there's your reading time for every meeting every fortnight, and a volume of paperwork that comes through in our system is huge. I have to say to you that I would probably spend somewhere at times approaching 40 hours a week on council.
So it's a full-time gig.
Others might spend less, and that's entirely their choice. But it's a matter of, I think, what you set out to do. Certainly, you can't be an effective councillor, if you just read the business paper on the morning of the council meeting and you actively don't communicate. I obviously read my business paper on the weekend. I actively communicate with the community about issues in that business paper. I make sure I'm am fully informed, and I go into the council chamber on that basis.
So it would be very difficult for someone with a full-time job and a mother and a father with children. It would be fairly difficult to commit to being a councillor.
I think that's absolutely the case, and age and gender come into that as well. But having said that, we need to open ourselves up a bit more. I've consistently advocated for webcasting with recording. Why recording? So that you can go back to that tape, click on the link and go to an item that might be of interest to you. Now, you might live in Canyon Lee or Balmoral
you just
or
want
Robbo,
to get that little part.
and you just get that little bit.
Yeah.
Or you might watch it live. I mean, I was sitting at home on the weekend doing council work, as it happens, but I was watching a live auction in Sydney of antique goods and so on. That is the modern world. Now, we don't have webcasting yet. It's coming. The state government have made it very clear that they want webcasting or videoing and webcasting. Every council around us does it, everyone, bar none. And of course, the technology from 4 years ago to now is plummeted. And recently, one of the news organisations sought permission to video a meeting on Station Street and broadcast it from their phone. We need to be more on the front foot in that space. You can, I was proud to get through last term, the ability for the media in the room to sound record, which gave a much higher accuracy on what was said.
Yeah, okay. I feel like we're stuck in 1996 when everyone's moving ahead to the future.
I think others might have that view, David, and yet the world is moving rapidly around us.
Yeah,
and as I
okay.
mentioned the fibre link to Melbourne. What an opportunity. No other shire has that ability to connect to the main north-south fibre link into the world.
Yeah.
And I think that'll be a reason why businesses in Sydney might say, right, we're moving out of here, we're selling our land, probably for residential, and we're going to the Highlands, and come with me. Now, in the States, businesses relocate for tax reasons, because taxes between states are quite different.
Yeah.
But and their staff often
So what's
follow
our
them.
unique value proposition
Oh,
here?
down here, lifestyle, without a doubt.
Yeah, so
and connectivity.
It could be. It
Yes.
could be lifestyle. It could be connectivity. It could be that we've got a technology hub.
And look, I'd love to say that there's something happening in that space, but there's not. But there is that program to look at putting fibre to the curb in the industrial area.
Yeah, okay.
That will, I think, lay an egg eventually. But we've got to go out and sing about it now. And there's just no interest in that space in terms of interfacing. In a different world, I would be up at Macquarie Street every other week, knocking on the doors of ministers and saying, look, we've got this idea and this is in your portfolio and we'd be interested. I mean, the old days of decentralising government sort of come to mind here.
Yeah,
right?
I often think, well, where is our state government?
Well, I'll tell you where our state government is. We are halfway to Canberra. We are really a good spot to be.
We've got facts down there. There's some of the Department of Justice. Well, sorry, down there. Department of Justice is right next door to us here. Fax is on the other side of Barrel. In Mossvale, you've got some local land services. We've got Department of Human Services. So where is our plan to build a government hub?
Well, I don't think there is a plan other than what's in the 2031, but there's not a sales role taking place. I've continually advocated for the need for us to have an economic development officer. Now we have
I noticed in the paper, and whether this is correct or not, but I noticed in the paper that there isn't an economic strategic plan. Is that right? Did I read that wrong?
No, that's not quite correct.
Yeah, okay.
The committee, which was re-established February of last year, which I chaired, sought from Council a strategic view on economic development for the Shire.
Okay.
We had, from the previous term, come up with a couple of hundred opportunities from summits and the like, very well done by our economic development manager and consulting with all the community.
Yep.
Hundreds and hundreds of people attended those. So the committee asked, finally, that Council give strategic direction. And that strategic direction was done at a workshop in late last year and brought to the community committee in February, and it identified 5 strategic aims, which includes fibre to the curb in the there. Great, that's fantastic. So a couple of hundred ideas out there, shrunk to 5. Let's get on with it.
Yep.
But as I say, that committee is now doesn't exist and is not going to be reconsidered until September.
Yeah, and one of the reasons to wait was so the plan that could be developed. Is that what it was?
That is said, and it was said again last night. But the plan was crystallised and presented to Council.
Could I get it and read it?
Yes, absolutely. It's in our minutes.
Okay.
5 key points and so on.
But it's not actually something published on the website. And
oh no, look, it's going to be fleshed out. But the 5 key points and look, our focus on food and wine. Tourist visitations. I mean, that's our key point in that space. That's growing phenomenally.
Yeah, and it's one.
It's one
they
of 5
all
points.
be complementary and
I think they are, and they're universally supported by all councillors from that workshop. So yes, there is absolutely a clear strategic direction, but it's now on ice for 6 months, and I'm quite sure our economic development manager is working on all of that. But look, quite frankly, I've said now for 3 budgets in a row, the 4th budget coming now, we need an economic development officer. In other words, a salesperson, a person to go and knock on doors. Yes, and get that business here, because we can't just sit here and say nothing. We've got to go out and knock on doors. Now, I have to say, Goulburn Mulwaree Council are extremely good at that. And they've always got 10 things in the air, of which 2 land on a positive sense.
Yeah.
Grants, jobs, the like. Recently, they just rewrote the rules on supporting business into the Shire for a brewery in Goulburn, and they actually gave some concessions in terms of Section 94 contributions and in terms of water and sewage charges, conditional on the number of FTE, full-time equivalent jobs, being generated over 10 years. Yeah. Fantastic.
It's a little bit of flexibility.
Have no vision in that space. And if we were flexible, our economic development zone west of Mossvale, fantastic, but it's very high-priced land. It's been invested on by major corporates, including AMP, for example, and what the problem there is that they've got an investment which hasn't borne fruit yet. So we need to be active in that space and say, right, what can we do here that will bring you to the table?
And that seems to me like that's the role of council. Like council's role is to create the environment in which community can succeed.
Well, I think, for example, we don't have a dedicated grants officer, which just appalls me.
There's so much cash out there.
And there's so much cash out there.
It's ridiculous.
Well, in fact, we had a session yesterday which was on funding and a current round of funding. The state government, for example, have got a huge amount of funding committed to country, as do federal, but the state one have got this money coming from Snowy 2.0.
Yeah.
Wow. And are we using that to apply it to broad community benefits, such as, for example, paths and cycleways? No. Are we using it for anything that has broad community benefit? In my view, no. And that will come out in due course. But we need a grants officer, maybe success-based. Maybe part of that remuneration is success-based.
So how is that going to fit into a council remuneration package? That would be very difficult.
Back to my background in small business and advertising
as a government employee
and all of that. Well, it may not be an employee. It might be a agency appointment, and maybe there's a panel, and maybe they share in maybe it's all done on spec, and they get a bonus if it comes in. I don't know, but let's go into that space.
Yeah, let's have a gander at it at least.
Competitor, I use the word carefully, councils around us are all doing that. Camden have an economic development task force, right? John Hewson, who lives in the Highlands.
Yeah,
right?
I'm trying to get him on. John, if you're listening, I'd love to have you on.
Well, I think that'd be a great thing because John, obviously, his economic credentials are superb.
Yeah,
and his
interesting story to tell as well. Yeah,
absolutely. And in fact, he's been engaging in some local matters recently.
I did read that.
I'm pleased. and I was asked last night at council, had I met with John? Yes, I have. Absolutely. I meet with a lot of people from all levels of life.
Well, if you could do me a favour there, Ian.
I'll certainly mention that to John. But I think communication, which he does very well, is very important. He wanted to know about Station Street, and I expressed my views to him. But on economic development, he also wrote a column about his input into the Camden Task Force, which is a community organisation not dissimilar to our committee, has the mayor from Camden, one councillor, then has a bunch of community people, and it's tasked to do economic development. So it is actually a can-do organisation. It's not an advisory, it's a can-do, open-the-door job.
Yeah, and you tie that in with the community development team at council that's working with young people, and that could start to address the problems with youth unemployment in the area.
David, I dare mention Station Street and the loss of 180 odd car spaces for the all-day car parking, but as John Hewson made the point in his column, we are at a time of very high youth unemployment in this shire, and you would think that, particularly the state government's focus on rail and parking at rail, access to rail, those two would go hand in hand. The ability to send young people on rail, right, to park their cars at the station and go to jobs elsewhere would be top of the list. And of course it's not. We're taking away over 180 all-day car spaces. But economic strategic outcomes must drive every decision we do. Unfortunately, politics is not like that.
Yeah, it's probably a good place to leave it, I think, for the day. But because I'm trying to avoid the politics of it. I'm trying to.
Unfortunately, David, it's inescapable because that's what it is. But politics can be a really constructive tool.
Yeah.
And as I say, when I was in the living in the Balmain area and working with HighCast Council, I was very successful with change from the outside, because politics is just about change. It's about getting community support and presenting your case. I do think we've got some way to go in this shire in that space.
So politics is about change. That's a really good spot to leave it. And what I'll do, I'll open Ian's sitting opposite me in the Highland FM studios, to any other councillor who wants to come on and have a chat. I'm really interested to hear everybody's views and opinions. I started this podcast for and about the people of Southern Highlands. So it is about us, and Ian's been very kind to come on and give us his time.
Thank you, David. I'm always available.
How do people get contact with you?
Oh, well,
don't know if you want to give out your phone number. But
no, my phone number and all my contacts are on the council website, and you're very welcome to contact me there. The email system. You can also look at my Facebook pages, both just search Ian Scandrett. There's 2 there. They contain my views, as does my website, which is currently being reconstructed, but of course is justfixit.org.au. But I welcome input from the community, and in fact, that's something that I consistently do, is get out. I will finish this podcast by saying that I asked a question at council again last night about our community engagement.
Just getting his last little one.
Oh,
in here.
well, it's relevant to what you asked. But, David, of course, we used to go around to all our villages and towns with a travelling roadshow where people could come along. Now, I criticised that roadshow not for its plan, but for our promotion of the roadshow. I felt we should have signs up 2 weeks prior, meet at the hall, bring your stuff, all that sort of thing. And we didn't. We eventually printed some signs and put them up 2 days prior. So we got the outcome in a way that I feared, which was less than substantial engagement. No, we're not going out to the community again with the roadshow, though we will go out on specific matters. Well, obviously I'm referring to the fact that we have a budget coming. It'll be released go to council on the 24th. That's Tuesday before Anzac Day. Our normal meeting is on a Wednesday. And it'll go on exhibition for a month. And I believe that we should be holding public consultations on the budget and substantial changes in the budget. And of course, yes, Station Street is one of those, with a substantial change there from 9.5 to around 15.5 million. So yes, we've got to go to the shareholders. We've got to go and talk to them, whether it's via this medium, via any radio, via traditional media or new media, and by community, signage.
Fantastic. All right, we'll leave it at that. And the offer stands. Any other councillors or any other community members who have any strong views on community and want to get them across, I'm more than happy to hear them. This has been HighCast. Tomorrow we have a member of community who's going to talk about community power. It's going to be an interesting one. See you then.